Monkfish was at one point incorrectly termed, in my opinion, as the poor man's lobster, mainly because its meatiness and texture. Of course, nowadays, it is the rich person's dinner. Because of its relatively mild flavors, it actually takes on other flavors extremely well. So, in the spirit of the poor man's lobster, we are going to cook it with flavors from the crustacean family. In this case, some king prawns. Let's do it. So first, to prepare the monkfish for searing later, we're simply going to salt it quite generously. A, for the salt to penetrate and season our beautiful fillet. B, for the salt to draw out any excess moisture that the monkfish has. So when we sear the monkfish, it's not going to create a pool of liquid, which is extremely detrimental to browning. If you want to measure, about 1% of the weight of the fish. And we just leave it at room temperature to marinate. Now, the prawn. To put the crustacean family in the monkfish, we're going to do it in 2 stages. First, by extracting a beautiful red, orangey prawn oil, which we will use to sear the monkfish. Second, by cooking the heads and the tails with some daikon, which would mop up all the wonderful flavors. And this will be our garnish. So, very simple. We clean our king prawns. So, you want to remove the eyes. A, because you don't want to eat them, but B, because they would cloud your stock and your oil. So we simply cut here, and this will also give you the opportunity to remove any sand, if present. In this case, none. So head, and you remove the shells. With prawns, lobsters, langoustines, crayfish, the beautiful red-orange color that you associate them with is fat-soluble, but not water soluble. Meaning, no matter how long you boil them for, the water will not get the color, but the oil will. And that's why we're making the prawn oil today, instead of a prawn jus. Perfect. Now we can make the oil. So, very simple. You cover it with any neutral oil. Today we're using refined olive oil, but vegetable oil would also be great. And you bring in some heat. To get the best out of the shells, I always prefer doing this over lower heat for a longer period. So medium to medium-low heat over 30 minutes would yield the best result. You'll get an oil that's not cloudy. We move them around a tiny bit in the beginning, just for the bottom to not catch. The oil will first evaporate all the residual liquid from the shell, and that's why you can hear this sizzling sound. Then it would slowly and gently fry the shells, taking all the wonderful flavors with it and crisping up the shells in the process, which we'll utilize later when we plate the dish. Right, while our oil is sizzling away, we prepare some garnish for later. First up, some radish, just thinly sliced to give us a bit of freshness, to balance the richness of the prawn fat. And purely for presentation's sake, we'll use the Japanese mandolin to try to slice them as thin as possible. Don't need all of that. And for them to curl up very beautifully, we're going to add some ice water. Next up, we have the daikon. If you don't have access to daikon, you can also use turnip. They would work equally well. Peel the daikon, and we make thin strips. Brilliant. Now, I'm saving a few strips for plating purposes later. Now, we can braise the rest. So, grab a saucepan. And to help us get started, we're going to add a tiny bit of this wonderful prawn oil. Now, the heads and the tails. If you're doing this at home, by the way, you can save the tails and make another dish out of it and just use the heads, because they are the flavoursome part that will impart most flavours to the daikon. Season of salt and beautiful. Now, just to pay our respect to lobster disc, bit of cognac. And you cook it out to evaporate all the alcohol. Once you can no longer smell the alcohol taste, daikon, they go in. And you first give the daikon a bit of time to evaporate a bit of their water content, just to remove a bit of harshness. Daikon, when you give them a long cooking time, this step is not necessary, but because we're just going to do this for 20-30 minutes, it's best that you let the harshness evaporate. We add just enough water to cover everything, lid on, and you let this simmer at medium heat for 20 minutes. All right, after 20 minutes, our beautiful oil is ready. Simply pass everything through a sieve, and you can hear how crispy the shells have become, which we'll now utilize to add texture to our monkfish. Try to drain off as much oil as possible. I mean, look at the color of this. We'll save it. And now the shells will go into a grinder, and you need a proper grinder for this. Now, we simply turn them into prawn shell powder. Brilliant. We line a plate, some paper towel, all these. The beauty, they come out. If you ever had instant ramen with prawn flavors, this is the smell. Brilliant. Now, we can finally cook the monkfish. As you can see, because of how fresh this is, not much moisture has been drawn out. We try to pat this dry as much as possible. Now, to stay true to the lobster theme, we are going to truss it so that it maintains this beautiful shape. This looks about right. So you form the shape once, twice, 3 times, and you pull. Brilliant. Now, hot pan, and we add our incredible prawn oil. I'm still trying to avoid the solids because they will burn. Beautiful monkfish goes in. And I'm applying some gentle pressure to maximize the surface area that's in contact with the hot pan and the hot oil to trigger the Maillard reaction, which is what's gonna make the monkfish taste meaty. And while that's happening, help the other side get started and take on this beautiful, beautiful color. With monkfish, cooking doneness is really a matter of personal preference. Anything above 42 degrees Celsius, it's good to go. And you have more of a sashimi-like texture. What you don't want to do is to bring it above 61, because that's when it starts to dry out. I personally prefer the higher end of the spectrum, because I like it to be slightly flaky. That's when monkfish is at its detectably juiciest. But it's a personal preference, so play with the temperatures. See what you like. Now we turn. If you're doing this in batches, you can finish it in the oven until it hits 5 degrees below the desired core temperature and take it out to rest. But because we're only cooking one tail, I'm just going to baste it. So beautiful. Now, we probe. I personally want the thickest part to get to 55, and that would bring the whole thing to 60, which is the right kind of flakiness. So, for me that's done, stove off, and this beauty comes out to rest. After about 5 minutes of resting, we very carefully remove the trussing strings. Remember the daikon we reserved. We're gonna enlist their help for our plating process. So we simply follow the strings and cover them. And here, I have a mixture of cayenne pepper and sweet paprika, both of which works extremely well with a meaty whitefish. And we're simply going to dust them and create a very light layer. Now, to really make this come alive, we drizzle the wonderful prawn fat on top. Perfect. Now, to plate this beauty, here we have some wonderful edamame beans, just for a bit of color, but more importantly, for a bit of sweetness that would reinforce the sweetness of the sweet paprika. And to that, we add the incredible braised daikon that has mopped up all the flavors from the heads, from the tails of the prawns. Grab our serving plate. Find the circle you're happy with, we flip. Now, with our beautiful monkfish, which we'll simply carefully transfer to this beautiful bed of edamame. And we carefully remove the daikon we've added. To that extra crunch, we add our fried shells, a bit of Michael coriander, our beautifully curled up radish, and some edible flowers. And that's it. This is my pan-roasted monkfish. I really, really hope you enjoy.